Ladies and gentlemen, not only has FF14 finally concluded its Alliance Raid story, one of the most impressive stories I've seen so far in the Alliance Raids, but more importantly, the ending of the MSQ and us leading into Dawn Trail. Let's talk about it. Ladies and gents, I'm glad you're here because I want to talk about all this stuff. I had a ton of fun over the last few days doing the Alliance Raid and doing the MSQ. I'm always delayed, of course, because we live stream everything that we do. And with FF14, it's so precious that people want that few days, a week or so to absorb it, get through it before we then broadcast it out to everybody and see what's going on and give my thoughts and impressions on it. And that's exactly what happened. I want to start off with the Alliance Raid because I've enjoyed this Alliance Raid story so much more than I've enjoyed the MSQ. Genuinely. The Alliance Raid with the gods and having Graha and Kral there, two of my favorite characters, has been amazing. I know it's not voice acted, but obviously I do my own. But it doesn't matter. I found the characters and the environments so interesting and so fun that the conclusion to this story was something I was anticipating more than the MSQ itself. I knew the MSQ was going to be wrapping us up in this sort of weird bubble, which is setting us up for Dawn Trail and probably for the next, like, maybe 6 or 7, 8 years worth of story. It's a foundation for that, and we'll get there. But the Alliance Raid is self-contained. It was going to wrap up nicely. Overall, I was so satisfied with the conclusion of this Alliance Raid. Talk about the bosses themselves. There was some controversy that I saw going on Twitter and things like that of people who were like... the environment's beautiful, the bosses are beautiful, the music wasn't quite as good this time, but I really didn't enjoy the bosses. And then other people were like, I really enjoyed the bosses, I had a lot of fun with it. So I knew before I went in that there was some mixed reception, let's say, to the Alliance Raid. Personally, I come from the background, I want to give some context to this, where I have gotten over the idea that this kind of content should be really in any way difficult. And this is a mixed opinion amongst many players. I see the Alliance Raid, similar to World of Warcraft's LFR, it's a place where people of the utmost bottom barrel skill level all the way to the top can queue up with a guaranteed chance of success, because this is the content that doesn't require organization. It shouldn't require some sort of elaborate communication scheme. It should be available for people who probably enjoy the story and many of the other wonderful elements that are not combat related in Final Fantasy XIV to go in, get some nice gear. Usually people care more about the glam than what the actual gear does or its stats or anything like that. Get them caught up to a decent enough gear level where they can then enjoy the MSQ, they can enjoy some expert dungeons, whatever it might be, and be a little over-geared for what they want to do. But they certainly have no interest in, like, organized raiding or farming savages, or doing extremes and things like that. I believe that's the target of this content. And therefore, I don't expect to struggle in this content at all. I really don't. And in fact, having experienced a lot of the worst of, say, WoW's LFR, this is the first time, we should put some context to this, that I've done the Alliance Raid when it's been current. Remember, I joined FF14 later. But seeing things like N'Zoth, Archimonde, all those things that I enjoyed back in World of Warcraft, that were a little too difficult for the target audience, and seeing those groups wipe, frustrated, people leaving, having to get replacements, all that kind of stuff, because they're not there for that. They've come home from work, they're literally looking to enjoy a beautiful environment, a nice fun boss with cool music, basically follow the leader. Where's most of the group going? I'm going to go there, collect some items, and get on with their day. And in that respect, I really enjoyed the Alliance Raid. That was the expectation I went in with. And I truly enjoyed it. I had a great time with it. And I saw the mixed reception in my chat about the bosses. It's like, oh, I wish it was a bit harder. I wish it was a bit harder. I don't, personally, I don't think this is the place for that. I'm not saying it should be like nothing kills you. Definitely things kill you in this Alliance Raid. 100% that happens and happened in our run. But it's not designed for, like, the group to fail and go back. And there have been some Alliance Raids, I think of, like, Ozma, where, like, one group failed, meant you had to do it all again. And it does get frustrating, because that's not really what you're there for. So overall, I very much enjoyed the bosses. I thought they were great fun and easily farmable in a pug. Just sign up and go. Should be totally fine. But the story. I suspected a long time ago that the story was that the gods were ready to leave. Like, it is a cliche story for sure, but those cliches are born out of a genuine idea that people who've been around for eons doing stuff, certainly in some sort of seclusion, you know, watching from afar, all those kind of elements, and being worshipped and almost being changed because of how that worship has reflected onto them, then they probably want a rest. They probably want to return to the star. They probably want a rest. So I kind of gathered that's where this was going. It sensed that it was going that way. But again, with FF14, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit cliche. It's how you get there. It's about that journey to get there. And the journey was really, really nice. Like, the journey was something I was on board with. I was totally immersed with. Enjoyed the hell out of this. It was a scenario that played out better than expected. And I really liked the turnaround at the end. It's like, I'm ready to now walk and be mortal and to experience the world without an infinite time to enjoy things. Because much like procrastination in real life, if you have eternity to live, your sense of urgency just doesn't matter. Like, that sense of mortality, that sense of impending there's an end to this road is what encourages you, or at least encourages me, to go and do things and see things in a different light. If I'm looking at things and I'm like, okay, I will massively outlive all of this, and I see you people come and go like ants on the floor, even though I am attuned and, you know, I'm in touch with you, and Heidelin has chosen me specifically to be the person that best represents this task, this goal in hand, then you'll take your time. You won't look at things the same. But when you know that there is an end to the journey, there is an end to the road, then you look at things differently. And to see the characters who were like, I'm ready to go, and some of them were like, actually, I want to, or one of them, it's like, I want to stick around and I want to walk this world that is my task and experience it properly. I want to visit my bridge. I want to see what it's all about. All these things that you'd expect them to have seen at some point, they hadn't done. And I really loved and enjoyed the conclusion to this. I specifically liked that it gave us some teasers as to who these people are in Elpis. Okay, you used to do this job in Elpis. Okay, I've met some people who do that. Is that you? Who did Vanar choose in order to be these people? Who did Heidelin like select that best embodied these distant elements? And can we go back to Elpis and find them? And we do know there's a few. There's a few. We haven't found. We did some checking, but you can't find all of them. But there are a few. But so overall, the Alliance raid I thought was tremendous. And if anybody was joining FF14 later, I'd be like, that's the best one. I like the Sky Pirates. I thought that was great, but this is better. I didn't particularly enjoy the 2B. I forget the name of the game now. It eludes me, but you know the one, 2B's raid. 2B's raid. Chris will no doubt put something in saying you moron, it's this one. The word Neo keeps coming to Nia. Yeah, that's what it is. For some reason I was thinking of Neo, the Samurai Souls game, but Nia. Anyway, let's move on to the MSQ. So this MSQ, I'm going to make a video which is going to be like a full review of Endwalker. Certainly after I've had all these different opinions. I talked about it with Zeppler on a podcast. She had a massive video about it. And I'm going to meet many FF14 content creators this week at FanFest in London. I'll be traveling there on Thursday. And I really want to gauge people's thoughts on Endwalker because they're mixed. And Endwalker is in this strange spot. It's the end of one story, the start of another. It's almost like two things happening. Well, it is. It's two things happening within one expansion instead of a continuation and another continuation going on into the next expansion with some story wrapped up. But usually there's not every element wrapped up because we're going to be continuing that story into the next expansion. This time around, though, it had a full hard stop. And then a new story began, which is a teaser and a build-up and a foundation saying. And it's been mixed. And even with me, it's been up and down. Obviously, it was tied very closely to Final Fantasy IV. And that continued to play out. They threw in some red herrings as to who Zero was. Was Zero Zeramus? Obviously, long before we saw that Zeramus was an actual character. And who is Golbez? Because Golbez is the big bad in FF4. So how does that translate here? Turns out it's not Golbez. It's not Golbez. And then trying to figure it out. And Zero is one of my first impressions of Zero. Overall, I mean, I'm going to put this out there. I really like Zero. I think Zero's a cool character. I think the beginnings of her character development are really quite solid. Looking at things through a different lens. Because we can get very used to how the Scions see things as not black and white, but they're on the side of good, despite the fact that they're constantly opening doors and portals and letting nightmares and things through, but they generally sort it out afterwards. But overall, that team is very united and strong, and then someone else comes in who is self-centered, narcissistic, that's because of the life she's led and the environment she was in. It's like every man for himself, and now she's seeing people just be, like, friendly, helping out. And seeing how people, this obviously portion of the MSQ was focused on how strangers view the Warrior of Light, like through interactions we've had over the years. And she's like, what? God, your name just inspires people. We got to return to the trolley, which was amazing, and all these people from Shadowbringers. And it was wonderful to go back to the Crystarium. Like, so happy to see Beck Luke again. This isn't a spoil. I mean, if you're watching this, obviously you're aware of many things. But one thing that really annoyed me before we get to the overall story was that Reen was there, and there was no mention of Gaia at all.
There you are.
What?
I waited and waited, but you never came. What have you been doing here?
Does this happen if you've not done Eden? And I'm really wondering how this is going to play out, because what's happening in the 1st and the 13th, and this needs its own video as well, this is why we'll do it in a proper Endwalker video, is there are things happening in the 1st and the 13th which directly correlate to each other. And they keep touching at it, but they're touching at it with, like, soft fingers, because the context and the full story exists in, like, the Shadowbringers role quests, the trial quests, the Eden raid line. But it's unavoidable that at some point these things have to collide, and the way they deal with it is by giving those characters from those stories. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but I am going to tell you this. You should go and do the Shadowbringers role quests, and you should do Eden, and you should do the trials, because there's a ton of extra content going on directly related to the MSQ. And every time we do a piece of MSQ, those characters from those storylines have a lot more dialogue because of things that are clearly linked that are happening in the main story, but they can't touch on because FF14 does not assume you've done Eden, or you've done this, or you've done that. And you might be asking yourself right now, who the hell is Gaia? And Gaia is from the Eden quest line, and very, very close. She's roommates with Reen, and Reen is around doing stuff, and there's no mention of Gaia at all. Until there is. Right at the very end, they threw in an extra cutscene where Gaia shows up, and I was like, thank God, because it was really irritating me that Gaia is such a pivotal person in Reen's life, and you're with Reen all the time, and you don't ask about Gaia. She never mentions Gaia, and I'm like, what is going on? This is really irritating. And then finally they do address it at the very, very end, but they have to tack it on as an extra, whereas realistically, it's just like visiting Reen and asking about Thancred. Of course you'd be like, where's Gaia, right? You'd be like, oh, how are you and Gaia doing, or whatever. But they did address it slightly. But at some point, these things have to collide. And whether they'll do it with the Crystal Tower, what they did there, which is like, hey, this is now mandatory content. Like, you need to do this. Because at some point, these things have to merge. They have to. Because they're so close. And they know that because they keep adding all the dialogue in of, like, yeah, this person would need to know about this. And this person would also need to know about this. They keep touching on it with extras, but at some point these worlds have to collide because it's nonsense not to, essentially. It's absolute nonsense not to. But Zero, my initial thoughts on Zero were that she was Cecil. That was very strongly represented in our first visit to sort of Zero's domain, where she was housing a bunch of lost spirits that were struggling. And there's a statue there, which is definitely Cecil. I don't care what anyone says. I looked at it for ages. We looked at it on stream. I was like, that is absolutely Cecil. Cecil is a character from Final Fantasy IV, the protagonist. And ultimately, the MSQ ends with Zero is Cecil. And not by name. I think they might change her name. But Zero is kind of cool, I guess, at least in the eyes of Japanese culture. From what I can tell from all the Japanese games I've played, Zero and Kane, Edge, Shadow, all these kind of things are cool names. Zero is not a cool name in my opinion, but I would prefer Cecilia or something like that to sort of really strengthen it home. But we did see Zero turn from basically the Dark Knight Reaper to a Paladin character, which is exactly what happens with Cecil in Final Fantasy IV. And I don't care if that's a spoiler for you. I told you to play Final Fantasy IV ages ago when this MSQ started, so you should have played it by then. But Zero's character development, very much enjoyed it. And I was actually really happy that they seemingly put that character to bed. They were like, okay, we've brought Zero in. Of course, we're going to see Zero later on. Zero is now a Paladin, but she's going to stick over here with Golbez and do their thing, because they're not involved in Dawn Trail, at least yet. They're not involved in what's going to happen next. We are hard stopping the story. Now, overall, I enjoyed this. Now, some people have called it filler. Some people have been like, oh, this is like boring MSQ stuff. This is not going to be relevant at all. I think you're all massively wrong. I think you're so wrong. It's insane. I'm pretty sure that every single element of what we've just experienced at the towards the tail end of Endwalker is absolutely going to play a pivotal role later in the story. Like, it makes... I have enough faith in the FF14 writing team to not waste our time. Because I look back to A Realm Reborn, and obviously compared to many of you, I played it very recently, is like, things came out of that A Realm Reborn that didn't matter for like 6 or 7 years. But when they did, it was like, awesome. That's great. And just putting them to side to say, we're starting the next chapter, but much like Gosetsu, much like Yugiri is, and Hien, those kind of characters, like, they're going over there for now, because we want to focus over here, and they'll come back when it's appropriate. They'll come back and do their thing, but obviously the focus right now is on Kryle's letter, where is her grandfather, all that kind of stuff, which is going to lead us into Dawn Trail. We got that ending. So my general feelings on the MSQ was that it was really good. You find a discarded Memoria Crystal and it suddenly begins to glow. Oh, is that how they're changing the environment? Yes!
Hurry, Golbez! The city is already overrun!
Sick! Oh my god, we're barren! No way! I enjoyed all the elements of it, but one sadness was that I had to play it at current date, which I didn't with any previous MSQ. It was one rolling continuous story for me, which got me very immersed. And I do have the problem on occasion of when the MSQ comes back, is like I don't remember some of the details from like the previous chapter, because it's been in such a long time. We play a ton of games, we play a ton of story. I was like, okay, I need to refresh myself. So I think overall I want to replay Endwalk from mid-Endwalker to the ends MSQ. The extreme and the fight was great. Really good. I haven't done the extreme yet. I'm in the middle of a Terraria full blind master mode run, and I want to get that finished, and then come and do some extreme and Criterion and things like that. But overall, yeah, really good. Really enjoyed it. I liked all the characters. I liked that they played with who Golbez was. I liked how we brought in the appropriate characters at the appropriate time. There was some weirdness, like Sid being, again, kind of a Deus Ex Machina of building a device that can shoot through the different stars and move the light that way, that kind of thing. Because it's like, again, coming back to what I said at the start of this, is like, well, doesn't that mean we can also move the darkness that way? Because we should. Can't we move a communication? If we could shoot energy through the stars, we should be able to send like a phone signal, right? Like, that makes sense to me. We should probably be able to do that and establish some sort of two-way communication between at least the 1st and the 13th in some manner. And again, it's these things that are like, okay, I get why you did this, but it's gonna lead that way, right? And I felt the same about the Alliance Raiders. Like, the gods are gone, but they're still, the people are still worshipping these automatons, but what if that goes awry? Like, I always in the back of my mind with FF14, I'm like, what is the twist here where this turns sour and horrible? Something's gonna happen. I thought it was great. I didn't feel like it was filler. I think it spent its time to establish multiple characters. It's not just Zero. She's obviously the main focus of the MSQ, but it's Zero, it's Golbez, it's Ajdaya. It's all those characters that are definitely going to play a role in the future, doing their part. But we are going to investigate, obviously, Kryle's grandfather. We're going off to Dawn Trail. And an interesting question I want to finish on today is someone in my stream asked, isn't it fine that maybe we don't start with some sort of... Oh, there isn't any conflict for the first patch of Dawn Trail. And what they meant by that is we're not going against some world-ending enemy or something like that. And the answer to that is no. You can't have a full patch in a game like this or a full portion of MSQ where everything's fine. Conflict is what breeds interest and story and drama. Like, that's where it comes from. I'm very much reminded of... I'm a huge Star Trek fan. Star Trek The Next Generation, I know this is a bit boomer talk for you, but bear with me. The first 2 seasons of that I consider to be the worst. Despite the fact it went on to be the most popular Star Trek series of all time, the first 2 seasons are pretty terrible. And one of the reasons is the creator of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, had a standing rule with the writers, is that none of the crew, so the main actors, the recurring actors every week, were allowed to have any conflict. Because his opinion was, in the 24th century, conflict among certainly a Starfleet crew just wouldn't exist. They would have ascended beyond petty conflicts and interpersonal relationship issues and things like that. And so all the conflict had to come from the monster of the week. And the writers had a hell of a time with recurring characters that seemingly couldn't develop in any way, because development generally comes from conflict in some way. Like, something happens, you learn from it, you progress as a character, right? And that's the same of all humans. But creating an environment where there's no conflict going on doesn't allow growth into our immersion or investment into those characters. Certainly when we're looking at fictional storytelling. If everything's just fine all the time, it's boring. Certainly when we're escapism into video games. So Dawn Trail, I've no doubt, will obviously have another piece of the MSQ, which will lead us into Dawn Trail. But I'd be ultra surprised if Dawn Trail starts, like, and everything's peachy for, like, the 0.1, the 0.0 patch. Everything's peachy. What that conflict's going to be, mystery. Is my gut feeling right now is there's some mystery. There's some information that has been passed down or taken as accepted knowledge, certainly by Kryl, that is not true. Something's not right. Everything that we assume is correct is not. And that's where that's going to go. So we'll look forward to that, and please look forward. It'll be on the main channel, is our proper Endwalker video when the final part of the MSQ is done. And for everybody else, I will be at FanFest on Thursday. Saturday. FanFest on Saturday, and I will be taking part in the cosplay competition. So if you see me in the live stream, you know what's going on. Bye, everybody.